Awesome. So we'll just get started in 10 seconds. So we'll let people join in. Um, Alrighty then. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got a really exciting webinar up ahead of us. We're going to talk about um, multiple flight safety aspects using FlytBase. We're also going to talk about the AVSS parachute and how it's helping de-risk flight operations, especially BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight operations. Hi Simon, you guys can chat in the chat box. You can also ask your questions in the right hand section. Today we have Josh with us. Josh is the CEO of AVSS. He's going to talk about different ways in which you can de-risk your operations for beyond visual line of sight. We're really excited. I'm filling in for Neil today. Neil got reported sick last minute, but I'll be your host for today. I'll help with all the questions, and with that, let me share my screen and set the agenda for today. So, Josh, can you please confirm if you can see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Great.
Awesome. So we've been doing at FlytBase. We've been doing autonomous drone operations for quite a while now, close to 6-7 years, and we've been doing it with large enterprises. So as part of one of our key learnings, the key learnings has been that there are a lot of pieces that go together for a successful autonomous drone operation. So you have the docking station, you have drones, you have alarms, weather reporting systems. And a key component of these systems are flight safety systems, given that you're doing these operations beyond visual line of sight. And we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about one such system, which is the parachute recovery system. And that's where AVSS comes in, and FlytBase integrates with AVSS to make sure that your operations are safe. So today's topic is de-risking BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight operations, and ensuring safer drone dock operations with AVSS PRS-M3DT. So that's the parachute recovery system for the M3D, which goes inside the dock 2. With that, I will pass on the dais to Josh. Josh, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. My name is Josh Ogden. I'm the CEO of AVSS. For those who don't know us, we are a Canadian company. We just hit 8 years old. We focus primarily on the safety items related to parachute recovery systems, flight termination systems, ultimately enabling customers to fly beyond visual line of sight over people, ultimately all within the category of more complex operations. One thing that's really important to note for those who aren't as familiar with the parachute recovery system and know how great a DJI drone is, and failure rates are extremely low. The purpose of a parachute recovery system is really important to understand, and understanding the regulatory nuance. Today's presentation is going to be a little bit different than probably a traditional one if you've seen one from me. Today we're going to be focusing a lot on kind of a checklist of when you're looking at parachute recovery systems, especially those that use energetics. Those are similar in like an airbag. That are driven around every day in your car, is kind of a checklist of what paperwork you should be looking for. The drone market and how we de-risk it is beyond just checklist and pre-flight checks. It's about integration partners. It's about supply chain. It's about regulatory compliance, not just in third-party testing on the system working, but also on how you ship the product, how you reuse the product, and how you ultimately are using that product. So if you could go to the next slide. Again, today, the outline of the presentation, we're going to really focus on a little bit about AVSS, give you some background. We're going to give you some general insight about parachute recovery systems and their usefulness. And then we're going to talk about procurement. And I know this is a topic in which A couple of years ago, we would never actually dive into, and we'd be talking about all our features and our unique selling capabilities and why our product is, the best thing since sliced bread. But we're finding now that the industry is evolving to, I want a dock, I want a software, I need some extra hardware. How do I buy this? How do I make sure that I'm buying the right stuff, depending on which country I'm in? This presentation is slightly targeted towards the US market. I will touch briefly verbally on Canadian and European regulations, as well as those that are using SORA. Next slide, please. About AVSS, like I said, we're a Canadian company. We build parachute recovery systems. That's a large part that people know us. We also do guided delivery. For those that play Call of Duty, a guided delivery is a system that we can drop from the sky and land in a really accurate location. We use these for resupply, dual use as well. We're using this technology for avalanche mitigation and other applications. AVSS as well, for those who do not know us, we are the largest reseller of parachute recovery systems in the world. We sell to over 60 DJI dealers. We also work with other leading drone manufacturers like Brink, AV and some others, Avient, for example. And then we do work with different government entities on dual use technologies for resupply, as stated before. Next slide, please. This is just a simple map of some of our resellers. It probably has been updated a little bit, but just kind of showing you the depth of our distribution, a lot in North America, Europe, growing in Australia, New Zealand, and in South America. Again, a lot of countries where a parachute recovery system, again, not designed to save your drone, but for compliance for the regulations. Again, typically those for over people and beyond visual line of sight. Next slide just kind of highlights some of our products related to drone safety and the products that we're doing with regulatory compliance, resupply software, and engineering services. So when we work with drone manufacturers or partners, we're building kind of an end-to-end solution, integrating with solutions as well as such with FlytBase. Next slide. And then with AVSS, one thing to understand is kind of the drone-in-the-box, DFR, BVLOS use cases. We've been doing this since 2020. We entered into the space not maybe intentionally, just by customers purchasing, and it's become a large segment of the market for us where we've got the experience. For example, in Chula Vista, California, we've been operating since 2020. They're kind of the benchmark for DFR in the United States and really globally. And they're running their whole city off, I think it's 5 M300s off rooftops. They're doing rooftop launch, but I think as we see with these original rooftop launch, eventually it'll move into dock operations. And this is where we've got the experience working with policing, and the nuances of working with that sector of the market is something I'll be touching on today. And then in the next slide, what you'll see is just another example of a rooftop location, but with the dock. This is in Canada. This was a trial with our Canadian police, and running Dock 2 last year, doing trials in a city of a few 100,000 people. Next slide. And then just this one briefly touches on some of the other products that we do work on. On the left-hand side is a resupply system that's guided, and on the right hand is the DJI fly cart with our drop system, or what we call snow darts, to do avalanche mitigation. Next slide, please. And so now we're going to talk into general insight. So this is an actual great photo of an example of one of our products in Europe, in Germany, at ProFly Center. So this is a DJI M3D for the Dock 2 with our parachute recovery system. This version is the EX version. So this is the enhanced containment with the external FTS. This is a requirement under European regulations when we talk about EASA, means of compliance 2511. And we talk about managing the air risk. Good thing with the Dock 3 is when we're moving into that product, you're not going to have that extra set of hardware because DJI has enabled us to segregate the flight termination system portion. And so you're going to have a lighter system ultimately. So very positive things on that side. And again, for this product, you're looking here, and the general insight on this one is a parachute system in this market for this use case is not just about ground impact. It's also about flyaway risk and making sure you're mitigating the air risk. And something extremely important for those flying BVLOS, especially in densely populated areas in Europe, which is pretty common near airports. Next slide, please. And so some general insight on what we're going to talk about. So on the screen here, you see one of our products for the Matrice 4 series. And what we'll be speaking today is about the regulatory purpose. One thing, again, I like to highlight is, like, when you're buying a parachute recovery system, you're not trying to save your drone. It's nice to have it, when you finish third-party testing, we have to crash 45 times. We don't go through 45 drones. We did a Mavic testing last summer for the Mavic 3 Enterprise series. We had 4 drones through circulation. However, you never know when the parachute deploys, if you're going to land on concrete, if there's going to be gusts of wind. So the really intent of a parachute recovery system is regulatory compliance. We're also going to talk about some over people compliance and some other unique considerations as you're evaluating different systems. Next slide, please. Next slide. So general insight. So again, highlighting and I feel like I'm probably reiterating myself many times, but really important to know, when you're buying a parachute recovery system, you're looking for that approval. You're looking for that regulatory consideration on adding value to your mission and getting those approvals. And luckily with EASA on the right-hand side, Transport Canada on the left-hand side, these lists are publicly available, so you can do your own vetting. You can make sure that they're on there. That doesn't mean you shouldn't still ask for the paperwork, but it's something that when you're thinking about BVLOS, you're making major investments. You're going to go spend the money on your dock, on your software, on your hardware. You're going to put your SOAR in. You don't want to be caught flat-footed with the wrong product, and you have to go back to the regulator and submit new paperwork because the specs have changed, because the systems have changed. So this is where having those checks online and validating extremely important. At the same time, too, though, is if you're looking at products, ask the manufacturer for that paperwork and say, oh, you're declaring this. How are you declaring this? Because, for example, in Europe, there's something called MOC 2512, which relates to your M2 mitigation, so your ground risk. And there's 2 ways to get that ground risk compliance. One way is the simple 2 tests, which we don't agree with. Example number 2 from MOC 2512. Based on our data, you need at least 30 tests to get proper data saturation for your descent rate and your minimum deployment altitude. And that is why we always use ASTM F3322, which is the gold standard for parachute recovery systems. This is an international standard that was originally created in 2018. And I would say all the mature companies, as far as drone delivery, parachute recovery systems, are complying with these regulations. I'm the technical lead on the ASTM standard as of 2 years ago, but when we started our company, wasn't at the table. So these are things that when you're looking at regulatory, it's great to be on the list first, really important. But for the European and Canadian market, I really stress asking for the paperwork on how someone is compliant, because not all compliance is the same, which I could probably argue a lot of things about. But ultimately, I like the gold standard. I like to make sure, because that safety system's there to work when you're not expecting the drone not to work. And it's just something that I think the rigor of the third-party testing is just paramount. Next slide. And this segues into some of the FAA stuff. So with the Federal Aviation Authority, they're far more thorough and the paperwork requirements. They lean on industry standards by default. Looking for an alternative means compliance another way, like the Europeans and sometimes in the Canadian market, not always, is a lot more rigorous. And this is where in the States, we actually have to have a means of compliance. A means of compliance is essentially a recipe on certain technology, certain steps and testing that we have to do to complete to make sure that our injury thresholds are within an acceptable range. So 11 foot-pound, which is 14.9 joules, or 25 foot-pound, which is 33.9 joules approximately. And that is where the FAA, it's actually a lot of vetting. And one thing you'll notice in the market, if you looked around at the regulatory compliance, like AVSS is compliant in US, Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all countries. But when there's certain companies, you'll see they're only compliant in Europe or such. And that is something that I stress that, like, why is that the case? And the FAA has the most stringent rules. And that's why we attack that market first. We choose the difficult path. We think that's the way forward. Next slide. And that's where in the US, they also have a transparent website to say what your paperwork is, what your declarations are. And so on here, you see on the screen is Category 2 and Category 2 and 3 compliance for our Mavic 3 product, as well as our Dock 2 product. And these compliance documentations are publicly available. And these are your checks and balances. Again, this is something that when you're buying a parachute recovery system, I believe the market has gone more mature. I think all your DJI resellers know this more. Not all of them, but I'd say like 90%, 80% hopefully at minimum. And this is where the paperwork really comes in, because as I said before, the parachute recovery system's there to enable the missions. It's to reduce risk to ground population, and it's to add value. It's not there to save your drone. It's not there as a way, it's a checkbox that you need to click, but you need to click with the right type of system. Next box, slide, please. And kind of going more into a US-centric focus, this is where when we're looking at compliance and paperwork testing and what you need to kind of get to your BVLOS operations, specifically in public safety. The FAA has recently updated their processes from what we call the COA, Certificate of Authorization, to now a Certificate of Waiver, so a COW. These COWs are important for public safety entities that want to fly BVLOS, and if they want to fly over people in non-life-saving events. So maybe you're doing crowd control, maybe there's just a 911 call that needs to be taken a look at. There's some kids outside a convenience store. For those BVLOS operations, to de-risk those, they want an ASTM parachute. So this is something that's required. And again, it's a means compliance piece that has more rigor than some of the other markets, but becomes the benchmark. Next slide. And then over people compliance. So this is another photo, an example in Europe where we were flying DFR as a operations in Norway. This is in Kristiansand, so southern Norway, and these are sitting on the rooftops of a fire department. So these over people compliance operations, why they have a parachute? This is a state enterprise. So in Norway and in Sweden and in some other countries, state aircraft have a different set of rules. However, what we're finding in the European market is those departments that are state run, they now have a lot of experience and they've had crashes. It's just a reality that happens. And for their own mitigation, what they're doing is putting this on to show public acceptance. Ultimately for them, they need to go to the city council. They need to go to different entities with public tax dollars. And this is part of their pitch to those entities that, hey, we've invested in the great technology to do search and rescue, to respond to 911 calls, and we have the safety systems as backup, because they have to go again to their city councilors and ask for budgets. And this is where having those systems are important. Next slide, please. And then this is a good, I think, if you're thinking from a US-centric perspective of what you need to do based on what type of operations. So when you're looking ultimately at flying over people under category 2 and 3, which is what we say buy and fly, you need to do far more testing because we're showing that the probability and severity of risk, the severity of risk is so low that the probability is accepted at a higher rate. And so, but to prove that, you have to go through a lot of testing. And you know, us as a company, we're spending over $100,000 per compliance, per product for each drone. And that is something so that our customers can have an easier path, so no waivers. For those that are looking to fly outside of category 2 and 3, it's a waiver process similar to not exactly like a PDRA or a SORA, but similar, where you're putting in paperwork to the regulator. And then when we look at the public safety waiver on the far right, similar thing. And this is where the testing, and one thing you can see is for category 2 and 3, it does have that extra requirement of injury assessment, but then you can buy and fly, no paperwork. So this is the trade-off where AVSS has tried to de-risk the purchasing of the parachute by doing all the additional testing so we can remove the variable of paperwork and the time lag that's required when you're sending back and things to the regulator. Next slide, please. And then these are the other additional consideration and requirements. As the market matures, you're starting to see different technology be used. Our company started with spring-based. We've moved into using energetics in a lot of our product. Energetics are similar to what's in your airbag. We purchase from vendors that supply Tesla, Mercedes, etc. So very high-end automotive companies. And with these products, there's additional requirements and testing that we've had to do to make sure that we can ship them. So these additional requirements are not worried about so much the air risk. It's more about the ground, about the shipping risks. So if we could go to the next slide. Yeah, if we could go to the next slide. Oh, perfect. This is where other additional requirements include your DFR software. What you'll see is some parachute recovery systems. Yeah, buy my system, do it, go ahead. But have you done the work for the integration? So this is an example of a FlytBase integration with our parachute recovery system. What happens when the parachute launches, deploys, sorry, and next slide, please. And this type of work, and this is where FlytBase will be speaking on, I think, later on, is, you know, this wasn't an overnight just plug and go. We had to work together with them, similar to our work that we had to do to get on Flight Hub. So when you're looking at parachute recovery systems, I would be asking on, are you currently integrated with this software? You know, don't ask for the roadmap, don't ask for the timeline. And this is where FlytBase will come and tell you which systems are integrated, which ones are live. And it's something that I think Kushal will speak on later. Next slide. Then the other consideration, and this is a new one that I think the market isn't as aware of. We're one of 3 companies in the world, in the drone parachute world, that have this declaration. This is one specifically for the US. We also have it for Canada, Germany, Netherlands, a bunch of other countries, Australia, New Zealand, etc., where we have actually had to go out and test our product with a third party to demonstrate in the shipment of the product that if DHL, for example, gets in an accident, truck lights on fire, that the systems aren't going to cause harm to them. And this is where, to the public safety people responding to it. So again, this is not so much on the air side, but this is on the shipment side. So we've gone and turned our class 1 explosive energetic into a class 9. Class 9 is the same declaration as like your batteries. So there is risks and you need to declare as dangerous goods. But by doing this extra testing, there's not crazy storage. There's not a lot of restrictions. And again, this is the AVSS approach of taking on the burden from the pilot, from the reseller, from the manufacturer, and doing all the extra paperwork in the background, such as our means of compliance, our declaration of compliance, and now with the shipments of dangerous goods. Next slide, please. In addition to this compliance piece, we also consider the transparency. The day that your parachute deploys is never a fun day. It's always a situation in which what happened. And the industry is an interesting spot where we always find that it happens so quickly that we get asked, well, why did you deploy? There's never the insight of, oh, the drone failed, the parachute deployed. It's always, why did you deploy? So with that consideration, we create these parachute deployment reports. This provides transparent data on what we saw and why we deployed. And this is the type of data that ultimately you can go to the manufacturer and say, hey, this is what AVSS said. In the case of DJI, their failure rates are so low, but this is just, you never know about operator maintenance. You never know about that bird strike, or things happen. And this is where, in our experience, having these data, having this report has given the customer insight into why we deployed, gave them the comfort of our system. As well, it gives them something to go to DJI and say, hey, this is what AVSS is saying. To date, DJI has never questioned any of these reports, and they've been great partners on this. And that's I think, a sign of a mature technology company that, this is where it's at. So yeah, this is something that I think is extremely important to the transparency on why deployments happen and giving you that insight for your own peace of mind. Next slide, please. And then PRS for public safety. So this is something that can be transferred to beyond public safety. This to me is a checklist that goes beyond. It could be used for utilities. It could be used for security operations. Essentially, this is a procurement checklist that I believe it gives you the checks and balances of what you're looking for to make sure that you're not buying something that's going to catch you off guard. So if you go to the next slide, this is a checklist, and I recommend screenshots. I recommend taking a look and going through a lot of the stuff I've already touched on about the compliance categories, about third-party testing, about category 2 and 3 for the US, about approvals. And then the compliance piece on the ATF documentation, as well as about your DFR integration software, and then your transparency, as well about your compliance with repacking. I think this is a topic too that a lot of people don't touch on in depth, and is something that's important. So our company charges $150 for repack services. I know there's some companies that are stating they'll do it for free. It's an interesting piece when you're repacking a system, you're inspecting it. You're looking at how the system has performed. You're looking at the degradation, and this is for regulatory compliance. Ultimately, we're in aviation. We're no longer in that hobby consumer market, especially for dock operations. You're wanting these systems out there. You're in an industrial use case. You're in a public safety use case, and the compliance on repacking is a critical component. We do it in-house, and it's something that when we're looking at, our products degrading, or is there any negative effect to the parachute? Is everything being inspected? As well, because we're using energetics, we're handling those dangerous goods and shipping them out. When I hear companies that want to use dangerous goods and energetics in their product, and then they want to tell you it's free repacking and you can ship it to some guy named Bob in California, I look at that as an example of someone who doesn't understand the rules. And are all these locations appropriately licensed to handle these goods? Our company's audited every year by Natural Resources Canada. They come in, they count our stock, they inspect our processes, they look at our site maps, our safety plans, and they look at who's touching these products. And it's something that I think in the drone industry, we're moving really fast, we're growing. And there's some lessons learned in other industries like automotive that already know these things. However, in our space, this is new information. And so these are kind of some checks that I really recommend you taking a look at. When someone says something's for free or something is a no cost service, or you don't need to do it, or you can do it on your own, you need to take a step back and say, wait, why? Why is this? Why is this other company adding in a friction item, and why are they, hurting their own sales process if I could just do this myself? Maybe there's more to it, and maybe it's something you need to look into. I'd love it for end users to be able to repack their own parachutes, but I would never pack a parachute and jump out of a plane. I don't know, I'm not skilled at that. So I think there's items in that, as well as overall just doing your check. So again, this is a list. I'm calling it for public safety, but it's definitely beyond. And it's for any really dock operations, considering your full system to maintain compliance, because you've invested in a dock. You want to make your return on investment, and you don't want to be shut down or have surprises and kill the program before it starts. So thank you very much for having me, and happy to pass it over to the FlytBase team.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was really, really informative. Even for me, I learned quite a lot. And I will surely reach out with more questions that I may have personally. But for all of the audience members, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. Prishita is helping us moderate, so she can pass on a few of those questions at the end of the session. But yeah, I'll just quickly cover a few. A few pointers, right? So Josh mentioned about the DFR software, or the software component of remotely controlling your drones, especially in beyond visual line of sight operations. So a little bit about FlytBase. We are an enterprise AI platform for drone autonomy. What that means is we build an enterprise grade platform that helps you remotely command and control and manage your drones. On top of that, we help with insights on the video feed that you're streaming in real time remotely. So that's where the AI component comes in. We've been building remote software or software for remote operations for the last 10 years. Around 4 or 5 years back, we started working with drone in a box technology, and we've been the early adopters, the first movers in this space. Since then, we've worked with a lot of large enterprise customers. And in the initial days, since the initial days, I would say the biggest consideration has been flight safety and regulations. Regulations have matured quite a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, something that Josh covered, and how companies like AVSS have been working in that direction. But at the same time, the overall industry has matured as well. With that, FlytBase has done so too. Over the last, I would say, 4 years, we've integrated with 16 plus docking stations, of which the DJI dock is one of them. So what I'll cover for you today is I'll quickly showcase a video in continuation to what Josh mentioned. So over the last quarter, we've integrated with the AVSS parachute system. So before I jump into how the workflow looks like, maybe very quickly, let me just talk about, or maybe I'll do that a little bit later. This is the FlytBase platform. What you can do is you can, as you saw just previously, you can trigger the parachute as an FTS, and you can do that directly from the dashboard. Once that is done, you get a notification in the alert section stating that the parachute has been deployed and the drone has initiated an emergency landing. What is also important is that the last known location is of the drone is pinned on the map, so that the pilot or the operations team can go and retrieve the drone safely. So this we were able to do with the help of the AVSS team and the DJI APIs that are available. We've released this feature earlier this quarter, and since then, what we can sort of certify is that with the AVSS parachute, we are the software platform that you can use to have safer operations and also get the compliance in place with the suggestions that Josh mentioned previously. with that, I'll just quickly recap. I know the video was a little short, so I'll just quickly go through what I covered. Um, once you're in the air and you deploy the parachute or the parachute deploys automatically, you get a confirmation in the alert section. Overall, what I wanted to also talk about is this is a flight-based platform. You're able to host multiple docking stations or drone in a box technology. You can set up for multiple one-to-many operations by managing multiple drones, docks. You get the video feed from the dock, also from the drone. You can track the drone in real time on the platform, how you would typically do for remote operations. As part of that, we've integrated with AVSS, as I mentioned, and you get a confirmation once the drone's deployed. What happens after the parachute is deployed? Post deployment, you get an alert. The alert's clear with an acknowledgement in real time. You also get the last known location of the drone for recovery. And you also get telemetry data of, once the parachute is deployed in the asset management section. So you also have the lat long of the location in the telemetry section. So these were three odd sort of workflows or features that we developed. The fourth one that I missed is also that you get an email and text alert once the parachute has been deployed. Right. And it also gets logged in the incident logging section. So you have the logs section in FlytBase where you get detailed logs for the post mission. So you get the information on the path the drone took. You get also a playback feature where you're able to play back the path of the drone. You get the media section. In the entire flight log section, we have embedded the incident logging feature where you get, if the parachute is deployed, you get a snippet of information stating at what time the parachute was deployed, and you can also see the last known location from the log section. So this gets logged for future reference as well. In the future, we are also, just to maybe share a little bit about our roadmap, we are integrating with external logging software such as air data, so you can push out these logs to your third-party logging solutions that you may be using. Right. In general, as I mentioned, we've been doing this for the last 7-8 years. Drone in a box, particularly for the last 5 years. And I would like to just maybe take a couple of minutes to cover a few items that we cover to ensure flight safety. The regular features that come out of the box are fail safes for link losses, low batteries, low battery conditions, RC link losses, internet losses. So those are connectivity losses. In any of those cases, the drone is programmed to return to the docking station. So you are able to trigger an RTDS or an RT-Edge, and the drone lands back safely. The drone also has the ability to auto-calculate what would be the right time to turn around depending on the required battery to land back safely. You're also able to configure no-fly zones and geofences. No-fly zones cage the drone, ensure that the drone does not fly over specific locations as you would imagine. And geofences are, cage the drone to fly in specific location. In case you have fail-safes being triggered and there is a no-fly zone in the direct path of the return to docking station path, the drone is also capable of dynamically planning its path back to the docking station. With these failed flight safety features, and also all the documentation that we've built over the last 4-5 years, we have successfully deployed with regulatory approvals on a project to project basis in over 15 plus countries now. Some of them are listed here. The important ones would be the US, Canada, Malaysia, if you're from Southeast Asia, for example, and you can have a look. Overall, the pattern is quite repetitive. There are nuances as Josh mentioned, in every geography. But from a flight command and control software point of view, you have regulatory bodies asking for the typical documentation, and you can find that on our documentation website. I'll put that out in the chat box. But on a case-to-case basis, we are also able to share information that will help you with your waiver processes. We also have a panel of experts who help with consultation on the regulatory processes, so we can get you in touch with these experts as well, and uh, they can help you out with the waiver process and also the documentation of FlytBase that would be required. This is the last slide that I have. With the help of the flight safety features and workflows that we've introduced, these are some of the case studies which I'd like to highlight that were enabled because of the flight safety feature. So we've done, I believe, over a 12 docking station deployment for CSX for railway inspection. Shell, I know for a fact, had an incident which triggered the use of parachutes, also from a regulatory standpoint. Dole is a plantation or a fruit manufacturing sort of a farming company based out of the US also, but this deployment we did in Philippines. And the rest are mostly for security operations. So that was my time. Thank you so much. I will pause here and wait for any questions that you might have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Feel free to use the Q&A section. All right, I see a few questions in the Q&A section. So I'll just quickly go around and ask them. So the first question is from Simon. We saw that on March 24th, an update of 945 was released where it seems that they no longer ask for the PRS for UAS C6. How do you read the fact that EASA has in fact removed the reference to the M2 mitigation of SORA?
Yeah, so C6 is a BVLOS operation. From my understanding, when we think of it from a C6 classification, you're doing BVLOS. Maybe you're not doing it in an urban environment. So if you're doing BVLOS in a, I don't know, rail line inspection in a remote location, like a parachute's there, you probably need you just need the flight termination system. So an independent way to kill the power. So the M2 mitigation piece there used to be a perception that people wouldn't instigate the flight termination system without the impact reduction. It was considered a human factor item. So that item has been to get C6, depending on what type of operation. I think there's still, in Europe specifically, especially on the NAA level, the national authority level, that there's still some confusion. And so that seems to be an evolving piece. And I think it depends on, is C6 BVLOS in a remote location where there's no risk of ground impact? That's where you just need your FTS piece. And so if you're using Dock 2, you'll still probably need that parachute FTS integration. I don't know if there's only an FTS module on market, but when you're looking at Dock 3, the FTS as a standalone incorporated, so that would get you that. So it really depends on the nuance of that operation of C6 when we think of BVLOS and we think of what type of routine operation you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. Another question from Simon as well. We read on the AVSS website that the DJI M4TD kit for Dock 3 will be available in Q1 2025. Where are you at? So he's mentioned Q1 2025. So
it should be Q2.
All right.
Yeah, so it's Q2. So yeah, so we're shipping in June. So right now, this week, we're actually doing an ASTM compliance for Matrice 4 series. So you gotta love the acronym SOUP. So Matrice 4 series being the non-IP foldable, the Mavic replacement, we'll say. The Dock 3 being the M4DT or M4D. That system will be the next one. So we're ready to go. We're just doing one at a time, and we'll be shipping that starting in June.
Awesome. We have another question on the same lines. Is AVSS integrated with Doc 3? That's, as you mentioned, that'll come out in June. How do you see the combination, oh, sorry, how do you see the combined system enabling safer BVLOS dock drone deployments in sectors like critical infrastructure, mining, or utilities? So I am
Yeah,
assuming yeah, please go ahead, Josh.
yeah. So I think ultimately when we think of these type of sectors, especially mining and utilities, you've got really expensive assets, and you've got the employees aren't cheap. You've got work safe considerations. You've got remote operations, and it's something that when you have those bystanders, I think that's a word that a lot of people get confused on. They think that, well, am I a bystander if I know the drone's flying there? Yeah. Am I bystander for an employee of the company? Potentially. Like if you're not part of the actual operation, most countries' regulatory language states you are a bystander. So when I go to the field to watch the guys fly and crash drones and deploy parachutes, I'm a bystander because I'm not a VO. I'm not part of the operation. So when we think of these operations like a mining site, yeah, they're my employees. They know that the drone's flying, but they're not physically part of that operation. And there's some people that try to play around with, oh, I'll just do a briefing in the morning and they'll be set. And I think the market's moving away from that kind of like cowboy approach, the kind of loose interpretation, and ultimately this is where, if they're working especially like an open pit mine, like those are people at risk that they might know the drone's there, but is that their only task, or no, or are they driving the truck, or are they doing certain tasks, and those become bystanders, and that's where the mitigation system I think is critical.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. Um, is FlytBase integrated with DJI Dock 3? I can answer that. Yes, we've released our integration, and you can reach out to us if you have any, if you want a demo or some sort of a trial license. Those were all the questions that we had, Josh. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the informative session on compliances and how AVSS is, helping customers or prospects sort of deploy safer and have safer operations. What we will do for all the audiences, we will share the recording over email with everyone. In case you want to share it with your colleagues, feel free to do that. That was it from our side. Josh, any closing thoughts?
No, I think DJI has done a great job with their Dock 2 marketing and advertising and showing the capabilities. I think you're seeing a lot of people preparing to purchase Dock 3 systems, and I think that's where the procurement side and digging into what are my checks and balances, getting excited about a dock is one thing, figuring out and getting demos that things work is one thing, but then getting your implementation and check boxes and making sure there's always. I find from the purchasing habits right now, or purchasing trends, that you get to a point where everyone's gung-ho, the budgets are approved, and then there's that like regulatory leg of do I have all my paperwork? And that can be stressful for a company or a project champion or an internal person who's pushing the projects along. And this is where I don't think you want to get to that last step and have all buy-in from your executives or your team, and then find out, oh wait, I bought the wrong system. And so I think just the due diligence on the paperwork, making sure that's there. If something's free, always question it, right? If something's free, you might you should be questioning it as well as asking for paperwork. And I think ultimately for your long-term success of your program, you don't want that last minute hurdle of, oh, I bought the wrong system, or I didn't have that piece of paperwork. So unnecessary delays that can be subsided by doing the homework in advance.